When trust exists within a culture, we find that people are more creative. They're more willing to share big ideas. We see that happening at the individual level. And now suddenly the team is rallying around ideas and they're elevating ideas and they're collaborating. They're living more of their own sense of purpose and they're tapped into the sense of purpose of the organization. So there's this really cool knock-on effect when we build trust inside of an organization.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Christy Skutnik. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I sat down with Tim McCleary. He is an expert in culture change activation and the founder and managing director of the Involvement Practice, a leading culture activation company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Under Tim's leadership, the Involvement Practice has partnered with some of the world's most recognizable brands to build high-trust, high-performance workplace environments that deliver measurable ROI. He's known for his empathetic, action-oriented approach and is passionate about unlocking the full potential of people and organizations by addressing the root causes of behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs. Listen in as we focus on involving others and the power that has in improving the vibes of the workplace. Well, Tim, thank you for being here and taking your time to talk about all the great things that you're doing, how you've gotten to where you are, and the new thing that you've just launched. I'm excited to get into that. So, as I do, how I'd like to start the conversation is just kind of grounded in you helping listeners understand how you define a vibe.
Yeah, I love that. And Christy, thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. How I define a vibe. So the way I'd like your listeners to think about this for a second is imagine your first day on a new job. And you have to learn the culture in order to fit into that. And there are going to be things that you do both consciously and subconsciously to pick up the norms inside that organization that may be very, very different than what you've experienced in other places that you've worked. But they're going to be pretty critical for you to figure out in order to be successful in this new role. So you're going to be looking for things like how people are communicating together, how decisions are being made. How do you approach your leader, or when a senior leader comes into the room? What's allowed in those types of conversations? Is it a collaborative environment? Is it command and control? All of these things we tend to, some of them our brain is locked in and we're picking it up and making mental notes, and some of it is just felt. And I think to me, all of those things add up to a vibe. We get that sense very quickly when we get into our first day, our first week, our first month. That helps us zero in on the vibe. And I've maybe jokingly, but there is some truth to this, said that within about 10 minutes of watching a team work, I can identify the vibe. I can identify what their culture is. Now, probably a gross exaggeration, maybe not 10 minutes, because there's lots of subtleties, of course, and human beings are very complex. Body language isn't always accurate. It tells us a lot, but sometimes it can be misleading. So it can take longer than that. But there are telltale signs that I think indicate what the vibe is.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's so interesting that you say that, right? Because when I think about my experience, and you probably the same, when you start at a new organization, you don't pause to think about all those subtleties. But if we just, as part of onboarding, even, we said to a new hire, hey, I want you to write down what you observe. Like we're so ingrained of like, task orientation and transactions of what we want people to do, not how we want them to feel. So it's almost like, what if, as part of onboarding, you know, in the HR space, we said, okay, I want you to write down your observations of what you see, feel, like body language, and then define it. And if we paused for a minute to do that, we'd probably pick up on cultural stuff, and it doesn't just like happen. It's like, ooh, that's how it works around here. How does like you said, how does communication work? How are decisions being made? I think as organizations, not all, I'm generalizing, probably fail to some degree to articulate that to new hires or even people that are currently working there, right? Of like how work gets done versus what work gets done.
Yeah, and it's gonna be different too. If you and I work in the same company, we may tell a new hire 2 very different things about this because it works for us, but it may not work for them. I love that idea. It's a win-win to document what that person is feeling and experiencing. So if we're in the company already, we're gaining insights into how they're perceiving the culture,
Totally.
good or
Yeah.
bad,
Yes,
and for them,
exactly.
it's bringing it into their consciousness a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what it is, bringing it into your consciousness, right? Instead of it just like happening to you, you're like part of it happening and part of creating it. So, yeah, I haven't thought about it that way, but that's awesome. Okay, so you've had this journey, right, of your own experience of being inside a company, a large company, and then moving into your own consulting practice. So I'd like you to some degree kind of take us back and maybe through some defining moments in your experience that have got you to where you're at today and allowed you to consciously understand why involving people is so important, right? And how you've created your involvement practice and then the be human piece of that has just recently come out. So but there's a story behind each place, and so I'd love for you to start with that story and those defining moments.
Yeah. I've been really fortunate. I think there are people who go through the path of going to university, going to college, and earning a degree in something, and then they end up in a completely different field, something that they didn't even expect. And that's not a bad thing. I was really fortunate that I had a chance to study and then apply exactly what I had studied. I'm a very experiential learner, which leans into what I do today. But having had that opportunity to learn kind of the theory behind what I was about to do was really, really powerful for me. So before starting the involvement practice, which has now been around almost 18 years, I
Wow.
had a 20-year, yeah, it's hard to believe. I had a 20-year corporate career, first in Canada, where I grew up. I grew up just outside of Toronto, and then here in the US. And I worked for companies such as Bell Canada in Toronto, and then moved into entertainment. It's a really strange kind of connecting point there. There's a thread, and I'll get to the thread. But my first major job was with NBC Entertainment out in Los Angeles. And I worked for AAA, so I moved from media relations and publicity into internal communications with AAA. Got pulled back into entertainment with Warner Brothers, and then got pulled back to NBC again, and was then in a more of a leadership position in that role. And then finally, my 20-year corporate career, the most major role that I had was with GE. And the thing, they seem to be all disconnected, but the thing that is the connective tissue is the fact that everything was related to communication. So when I started my career in Toronto, I actually started as a photographer. I was a commercial photographer. I used to shoot fashion and I used to shoot product, and I loved it. So that's what I'd gone to university for in Toronto initially, and then transitioned into public relations and media relations, where you have to use visual communication in those jobs very often. And then moved into being a writer and an internal communicator and all these different roles. Again, always in the communication space. The other element of my career was always about building, and I was really fortunate. I guess I always had the entrepreneurial spirit in me. So I never wanted to just walk into a job that somebody else had done and just continue to do that job, just
Oh my
maintain the
gosh,
job.
I feel that in my soul so deeply. That is who I am too. It is, yes. And when you find yourself in that situation, you're like, okay, I think I need to like either break something so I can build it again or just move on to the next thing.
Well, it's exciting, right? To
Yeah.
do something that people haven't done before, to add value to the department or the organization you're with. That to me was always the great fun and a huge challenge. I mean, when you're facing things that no one's ever done before. And a great example of that was when I was at NBC the second time. The challenge I was given, and this is dating myself, but they said, listen, there's something going on with this space called .com. It's some kind of something's going on with that. We don't quite know what it is, but we know we need to make it part of what we're doing as an entertainment company. And so my challenge was to figure out how we might use a website to deliver publicity materials out to the outlets that reported that, you read in TV Guide or your local newspaper, and it would tell you what was on TV that night or that week. So we found a really efficient process to be able to write our publicity materials, package them up, put them up on the web, very early days of the web, but then also go and do photo shoots digitally. And no other studio in Hollywood was doing it this way yet. Because of my photography background, I was able to work with some exceptional photographers on the team there, took over that team, and we were buying $20,000, $25,000 still photography cameras. I mean, they're not that price anymore, of course, but it was all high end stuff because it was new. I can remember, I won't say the brand, but I can remember a major brand coming in and showing us this laptop. And the guy said to me, now, the difference between this and any other thing you've used is it has a really bright screen. So you can do shoots outside and you'll still be able to see the images on the screen. Well, okay. So you turn up the brightness on
Yeah.
your monitor. And of course, this was astronomically priced because it was a special tool. But all of that to say that was something completely new and different. Nobody had done it yet. We figured it out. I remember the ad department in NBC saying, "Gosh, I don't know that we can take a digital image and blow it up for a billboard." And so I remember just poring over these images that they blew up like one small 5-inch square to see if the resolution would hold, right? So could it be on a billboard? Well, of course, the process to take an image up to a billboard is very different than a standard photography process. So it all worked. It was just it was a big swing, and we didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out, but the keys there were just really creative people on the team who were willing to lean in and learn it and execute it.
That was going to be my question. Like, how did you get those people, right? That's like really a change in mindset of like, we're going to do something. So you and I can be builders, but to get a team to also, because many there, people are different and many people like to sustain that is their core strength is like, I will continue to do good by what you've built. So what was it that you did or the organization did in order to get people to move along and change their mindset to kind of get on board with like, this is what we should do this?
Yeah, good question. So this predated any of the techniques that I or approaches I use today with our team around culture change activation. But I think what we naturally did is just took small steps. So instead of flipping the switch and saying, now all of our publicity materials are going online, that's where these editors are going to be downloading images that we choose and the copy that we write. We had to slow down a little bit and prove it out and show people this could work and then teach our audience how to use the tool. So we spent a lot of time, I'm going to say, holding their hand to get them used to it, made the, very early days website as simple as possible. We developed something called a light board that you could go in and you could see all the images that they could choose from, and then they could download it. And that would be the image they would use in their newspaper or their magazine, or whatever they were publicizing the show in. I would say probably the greatest resistance though was internally. And there's an incredible team on the advertising side, like really, really good people. And I was friends with them. We had trust, but they had a job to do. And if what I was bringing them might result in a product that wasn't great for them, they're on the line for that. They're on the hook. Those are big dollars being spent. So it was developing that partnership and going through the process together rather than me saying, we figured it out, go do it. I didn't have the power to do that. I had to bring them in. And even if I did, it would have been the wrong approach. I had to build their trust, do those tests of, a 5-inch square blown up beyond what it would ever become, just for us to look at it and say, you know what, this is going to work. And then toe in the water, and gradually we gained momentum, and it became just an incredible system that we took internationally as well.
Wow, wow. So in all of in your journey, what was like the defining moment that you're like, I'm going to go focus on this, what you're doing now versus continue, because it sounds like you had a very successful corporate career, right? So and maybe it wasn't a moment in time, but rather, several situations that kind of led you to the same point.
Yeah, it actually was a moment in time,
Oh,
interestingly.
okay, tell me.
Yeah, yeah. So, I was recruited up to the corporate office of GE in Fairfield, Connecticut. My colleagues back in Hollywood were like, Are you crazy? You're leaving entertainment to go to this corporate behemoth. Why would you want to do that?" And the offer was, come and spend 18 months with us and bring what you've done at NBC, help us build what we're doing with, again, .com, ge.com, and inside GE, that was their intranet, early days. Bring that, what you've done, into this new environment. So that was my first, the step that got me into the corporate office of GE, which at the time owned NBC, which is why they pulled me up. The next job I had came about literally with the chief marketing officer showing up at my door on a Friday night at 7 o'clock and saying, "We're thinking of refreshing the GE brand. Is this something you'd be interested in helping us lead?" And I immediately answered her, again, building opportunity. I said, "Yes, of
Yeah.
course." She's like, "No, no, no, wait. Take the weekend and think about it and tell me on Monday." I said, "Well, I'll take the weekend, but my answer is still going to be the same. Like, let's go. Let's do this. I'm excited." And so that was the beginning of GE's effort to simplify the company. How do we help customers, employees, share owners understand the complexity of this company? And let me paint the picture of how complex it was then. There were 311,000 employees.
Whoa.
There were more than 100 businesses, and we were in more than 100 different countries. So any one of those things is complex, right? But
Yes.
all of those things combined, that's a big operation. And so when we built the strategy to start to rebrand the company, the one thing we did that kind of meant we were swimming upstream, because it wasn't the norm. It was typical for GE at the corporate office to come up with strategy and then push it out. And it was a very command and control type environment. So smart people in the businesses said, "Yep, got it. We'll execute." We took a very different tact. We said, "Let's take the strategy, let's give it away to 250 marketers around the world who will become our partners. They will be the ones that will actually activate the strategy." And there were a couple of things that were really important. So this was the first time I really started thinking about involving people. Remember, our company is called the Involvement Practice. This was the first foray into involving employees. And what we did is we shared the strategy, listened to them, really leaned into listening to them. But more importantly, we let them localize it. So we said, how does this play in Singapore? Now, we did a lot of studying around the color palette and the choice of a custom font that we had drawn for us, the use of imagery, all the things that express a brand. We were very, very careful about that. But even with all that work, we did not get everything perfect. So it meant that maybe the team in Singapore said, "You know what? That word does not translate properly for us. We can't use that." Or this color is too close to a color that is actually conveys something very different in our culture, so we can't use that. It didn't mean we threw out the brand expression or the strategy. It meant we had to localize it. So there's a couple of things here, Christy, that are important. One is, when it's a big change like this, as the leader of that change, you have to filter out the noise, because if you're about to go through a big change, you're likely going to share with me the reasons why you have some concerns or doubt, or why you're resisting the change. So I have to parse what is the natural human reaction to change from the actual strategy we're trying to roll out.
Gosh, that's so hard to do. Again, have to be really, really aware of like each present moment and the information coming in, like the inputs versus the outputs.
I think you're right, and I think the key to that was spending a lot of time on the road. So getting out to these countries, working with people, showing up, not just sitting in the corporate office and saying, "Guys, go do it," but being their partner and listening and saying, "Okay, that's great feedback. So let's modify the program for your culture to make it work in the place in the world that you sit." That was the start of leaning into this notion of employee involvement. How do we really involve people? We had a very rapid execution of the rebrand, not just because of my team, but everybody across GE was working to simplify. Every function was working to simplify GE, and that propelled the change forward. But the success of using employee involvement led me to write the business plan for the involvement practice. And I thought if it can work in a company that is as complex as GE was, 311,000 employees, gosh, we could probably go and do this in companies that are smaller or equal in size or even bigger. And so that was the genesis of the involvement practice. And I did some other things while I was still at GE to play with this idea, some really creative things to get people to understand the brand strategy and tap into the new tagline, which was imagination at work. How do we create this correlation between imagination and creativity and invite creativity into the work that people were doing? So, a lot of different great partnerships and things that we did to help people get their arms around it.
It also sounds like you likely had a leader or leaders who allowed you to be exploratory and be creative in doing something new and different. And I think that's like when we talk about leadership and probably a lot of the work that you're doing today, it's not just you leading a team, but the people leading you that allow you to be you, allow you to explore and experiment. And it sounds like you probably had some of that, maybe not all of it, but some of that that you could show like in these micro moments like I'm going to just try it. Let's see if it works, then we'll back up and we'll try something else. And that's really cool because I've worked for leaders and I've coached leaders that just this isn't their natural tendency. And they don't go there. They just follow what they've always known or what somebody's told them versus like pausing to think about like what could actually work.
Yeah, we did have an incredible chief marketing officer who was a visionary. She was so good at giving you enough information to understand where we were headed and what she wanted us to achieve without necessarily defining the entire picture yet. And then you arrived at the next plateau and you're like, oh, that's why she wanted us to
Ah,
focus on this. I mean, it was pretty
wow. That's an
magical.
art.
It's an incredible art. And she, to this day, I would say she has a photographic memory. You could take her a piece of creative that I'm making this up. Let's say that the font was in blue. And then 3 months later, you take it back to her and now it's in orange. And she would remember what the original creative looked like from 3 months ago and ask the question, not to say, this is wrong, but tell me about the evolution of this. So, a very, very bright woman, photographic memory, and an incredible visionary, knew where she wanted to go. And maybe she didn't always know exactly where she wanted to go. Maybe it was she knew the next step, but she did it with such confidence and creativity that it drew us in to want to do the very best work that we could do to help the company get to where it needed to go.
So she probably, without even knowing, was doing some of the tactics of your involvement practice, right?
Well,
It was
yeah.
just so natural to her. She was involving you guys as you were involving others, and it just kind of like the downstream impact was sounds like pretty incredible.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about this transition then from doing these amazing things at GE and involving others and seeing like the fruits of that to developing your business plan and now 18 years later what you've created. And I know you and I talked a little bit about a lot of what you do, or more of what you do more recently is like this neuroscience backed or practice. So just let's jump in.
Where to start? So, the secret sauce of a healthy culture for me is trust. That's if you ask me about the one ingredient that would be the secret sauce of culture, it's trust. And there's a number of reasons for this. When trust exists within a culture, we find that people are more creative, they're more willing to share big ideas. We see that happening at the individual level, and now suddenly the team is rallying around ideas and they're elevating ideas and they're collaborating. They're living more of their own sense of purpose, and they're tapped into the sense of purpose of the organization. So there's this really cool knock-on effect when we build trust inside of an organization. What we know from neuroscience is that high trust cultures are 50% more productive, 50% higher productivity in high trust cultures. And it makes perfect sense, right? If I feel like I can take a risk and people have my back, there was a kind of a maybe not such an unspoken rule, but there was a bit of a rule at GE. Take a risk, take a big swing. If it fails, learn from it. We're not going to appreciate it if you try that same thing again and you fail
Right.
again. Like that's not part of the game plan, but take a big swing because there's so much we can learn. And maybe it's not that one thing that is successful, but we find other things that can be offshoots that can be really good for us to grow. So I mentioned, and then you mentioned neuroscience. We have a neuroscientist who is part of our extended team at the involvement practice. His name is Dr. Paul Zak. He's been doing this work for more than 20 years. And I've known him now for a couple of years. And I remember meeting Paul, and he was explaining the work that he's done over the years and how it's evolved. And I literally said to Paul, "Where have you been all my life?" Because this is exactly what I was looking for, but didn't know existed. So we knew when we used involvement approaches with a team that there was a very specific end result. We could move a team forward. We could help them solve challenges in their culture, not because we came in and told them what to do, but we created the space for them to go through it. And I'll pause there for just a second because we have a methodology that is very simple: understand, own, and activate. So our goal, once we've done a culture diagnostic and we understand what's really good inside the culture that we need to elevate and propel, we also understand where the gaps are, where the challenges are. And so our goal is to help a team or even an individual, if we're coaching them, recognize either the pain point or the opportunity of a change, find a way to own that themselves by answering the what's in it for me, so that they can go and activate and create this ripple effect across the organization because they get it. The death of big ideas is I think it's rumors. It's people who want to get involved in gossip and like what a terrible idea Tim came up with, and he's trying to roll this out, and like what is he thinking? The other is true though. If we can build an environment where we're minimizing gossip because we're elevating trust, we're being open with our teams, we're being candid, we can create a really productive environment that can help the team grow.
So you talked about this, you talked about really quick this word trust, and I don't want to lose sight of it, and because it's a big word, it feels very elusive of like, oh yeah, that sounds good, but I don't even know, if I don't have it, how to build it. What do I do next? Like, I'm in this environment, or I'm a leader, or I'm going to be the, chief whatever. What do I do to make sure that I have that first so I can go do these other things?
Yes, yeah, that's a insightful question. So I think a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, where she talks about caring deeply, but also being direct as well with your team members. And that's what builds trust inside an organization. So I'm honestly on the fence on whether we want to invite people to bring their whole self to work. She talks about that a lot in the book.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that I may want to protect whether or not I have a family, whether I have a partner, whether I have kids or a dog or any of that. I may not want everybody to know that, and that's okay. I used to think that really unlocked some of the trust inside a team. I think it's better for people to decide how they want to show up at work. But when we can create this trusting environment, they're more likely to be a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more authentic. And I think those are the other two ingredients that lead to trust. And we do a lot of work around authenticity and vulnerability with teams. And I loved when a couple of episodes ago when you talked to Mark McFatridge,
Hmm.
is that his last name?
Yeah.
Yeah. The term that he used was unapologetically authentic. I resonated with that immediately because maybe instead of bringing your whole self to work, and he gave a great example of how he created that environment in the bank where he allowed people to show up in jeans if that was appropriate for the customers they were serving. Being who they were was so important. And I think when you create an environment where those things are allowed to happen or enabled, maybe more than allowed, you can build trust. Back to your question of how do I know it when I have it? Well, this is where neuroscience comes in, and this is some really really cool stuff. So this is kind of sci-fi in a bit. That years ago when Paul started doing this work, he would be doing blood draws from people to measure oxytocin and dopamine in their bloodstream. So it
Whoa.
would be pre-event, during event, post-event. He'd do a blood draw, and then he could see that those chemicals that are naturally released in our bodies are present. That then moved to what you've seen, which are those hats with, I guess they've got all those probes or
Oh,
diodes or
right.
something on them that are picking up brain waves. Now, what he's doing, and I'm going to, for people who are just listening, hold up my Apple Watch. He can measure this through your wearable device, your Apple Watch, your sport band. And I'm not going to get into how he does it because he's the expert and I'm not. And I'm sure I'll say things that aren't correct. But to distill it down, he's looking at your heartbeat, but that's not the thing that's indicating the release of oxytocin and dopamine. He's using an algorithm to extract that data. So, Christy, let's think about the application of that then. We're about to work with your team, and we've done our culture diagnostic. We know where the issues lie, we know the good things in the culture that we want to propel. What if we had them wear their sport band or their Apple Watch and tie it to Paul's app called Six? Anybody, any of your listeners can go and download it for free right now, and they can start using this. Super cool. What if we did a baseline measurement? So for a couple of days, we're tracking trust. This is all commingled. It's all anonymized. So I can't see your data and my data. Paul can't see that. He's just seeing the trend. Then let's take them through an immersive offsite, which is just one thing we do, but let's take them through that and see where trust is building, where it may be waning as we're going through that experience, where we need to lean into more of the experiences that we're delivering. And then let's do a post measurement and see where we're at. So, as Paul says, our brains don't lie. You can't game
Yeah.
that. If I take you through an offsite, your team through an offsite, and I give you a post survey, we know that people are generally going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to be kind. Some people will say the food stunk, or I didn't like that piece of the day because it made me
Sure.
feel like this, right? And that's good. That's valuable. This way of measuring what our brains are actually experiencing, that can't be faked. And
Wow.
and your listeners can, if they download the app and use it, they're going to see that it's going to tell them. Like right now, I don't have it on, but my guess is my brain is firing on all cylinders. It's enjoying this, and at the end, the app is going to say, "Tim, do more of that." But there may be moments where you ask me a question that really makes me stop and think, and my brain is now processing three or four different ways I might answer it. It may show my brain was frustrated because our brains are actually really lazy. It's a really lazy organ in our body. So being able to see that we can now understand what do we need more of. The reason it's called six is we need six positive experiences to offset a negative experience. We know that in the classroom with children. We know that raising kids as parents. Well, we know that with day to day life as well. And this app allows us to see what could we be doing more of to have more stuff that our brain enjoys. It's positive, and then downplay the stuff that is frustrating to us and negative.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, that's so interesting. Okay, so 6 positive experiences to offset 1 negative. If you just think about, like, the typical work day or the work experience, I am certain or kind of things that we have set up in an organization to create feedback loops or performance reviews or what have you. I am not sure many of those processes are actually following that in order to allow people to feel good about themselves or successful. And I'm not saying everybody gets a trophy. That's not what I'm saying. But I mean, it's just a fact of neuroscience.
It is, and when you think if I go back to the the book Radical Candor for a minute, Kim talks about, the fact that the what is it, compliment sandwich or feedback sandwich, or
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
we've all heard it, right?
Yeah.
Deliver a positive, put the negative in there, and end with a positive. She debunks that and says that's people see right through that, right? So a better way to go is to, over time, as a leader, which is very hard for us to do, right? When we get tapped to be a leader, we're probably technically proficient, but we may not have had a lot of experience or even training to be a leader. So this adjustment to being able to be comfortable giving direct, candid feedback immediately when something is off, not in front of other people, after the meeting, pulling somebody aside, but being really clear, that builds trust faster than just constantly, Christy, you're doing such a great job. I love it. You're knocking it out of the park. I don't need to, be in your business and watching what you're doing every day. I'm not going to micromanage you. Well, we do need to be involved in what they're doing, not to tell them what to do, but we need to understand enough about their day to be able to offer support. And when things are getting off the rails, to be immediate and very clear about behaviors that may not. We're not saying to the person you're a bad person. We're saying that specific thing you need to address.
Covey calls this the emotional bank account, right? So
Yeah.
you have to fill it before you can deplete it, right? And it doesn't mean the sandwich every time. It just means, like, are you giving more than you're taking, or are you in the negative because all you're doing is taking? I mean, there's several ways to look at it, but it's really like an easy way to think about it. And it's probably in personal relationships too, right? So it doesn't just land itself in the workplace, but it's in personal relationships. Like, is that give and take enough there that you're not feeling depleted from the other person, or you're not depleting somebody else? So, yeah.
And when we're filling that bank account, are we being sincere? Because people show they see right through
Yes.
that too, right? Are
Yes,
we being sincere and,
absolutely.
and specific?
Yeah, is it monopoly money or is it real?
Right.
Okay, which leads to this new thing that you've launched, Be Human, right? And this is talk about like filling your bank account over a simple way. It's like pulling all of your work together is what I see from it, right? From the outside looking in. But I'd love you to explain like what led you here, what is it, and what is happening? Like what are you creating? Because I think it's just from what I can see, incredible.
Thank you. I'm incredibly excited about this. We have been working inside organizations, brand names that you would know, for 18 years, and have had great success because we're doing what we do very differently. We're using involvement to help shape culture in a positive way to help organizations grow. And for a long time, I was trying to find a way to take this into the community. I understood the power of it. The team understood the power of it. We just couldn't find the right thing to bring it in. And I've done things over the years where somebody has asked me from the community to help facilitate a community group, community discussion where there's something going on in the city that they need to help people understand and rally around. But it was never quite what I envisioned. And it was during actually a podcast. I was on a
Oh,
podcast.
where your dopamine is high.
My dopamine was high, and the host said to me, "Tell us about your work." And I said, "If I had to distill down what we do, we help people see each other as human beings, not just as coworkers." So that's where we get into authenticity and vulnerability. Not everybody wants to go there, but if we can create space for that to happen at a level somebody's comfortable, that's really powerful stuff. Helping people see each other as human beings, not just as coworkers. And her response back was, "Oh, yeah, be human." And I said, "Oh, be human." And the light bulb went off. And I thought, in this time that we're in right now, with everything that's going on, you and I are sitting in the US, your listeners are likely in lots of different countries. This is not unique to the US right now. And this is not political. In no way is this political. What if we could help people be human? And what I mean by that is, what if we could each generate an idea of something we could do, something simple? This is not a really sophisticated thing you have to come up with, just a simple idea that you could practice for a day and look at what the impact is of that action. I'll give you an example. In fact, we've been running the community now for several weeks, and there's a thread. There's amazing ideas coming in literally from all over the world.
Ah, so
A
cool.
very common idea, and it's expressed in different ways, is the power of smiling at people. And we know there's something psychological that when somebody smiles at us, our natural response is to smile back, right? Unless there's something there that tells us this is a
Right, not right.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
not quite right situation. But somebody smiles at you on the street, you're likely to smile back. So I'm hearing that a lot right now. Well, just smile at people. Hold the door open for somebody and smile and let them go first. We've fallen into this pattern where we've become a me first culture. And I originally thought it was because of the pandemic, but I remember writing a blog post probably around 2017, 2018, where I was observing the me first culture. It's people cutting you off in traffic. It's people cutting in front of you in line. It's people opening, going through a door, but not holding it for you, just complete unaware, a lack of awareness of what's going on around us. The pandemic amplified that. We all were taking care of ourselves, understandably. We need each other. We need community. We need to get back to more connection with each other. So the community that we launched it's a very simple single web page. It's be-human.today. And I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes
I
for
will.
people to
Yeah.
look at. Be-human.today. We invite people to go and share an idea. They can add their first name, the first initial of their last name, and where they are in the world, because that's really helpful for us to understand where they're coming in from. And then we'll take that idea and we'll put it on the site, we'll share it. And in phase 2, we're going to start to invite people to pick one of these ideas and practice it for a day. Practice it in your place of work,
My gosh, I
practice it in
love
your
that.
community.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get the idea of dropping a pebble into a still pond, that ripple effect. If I hold the door open for you in the morning and smile at you, are you going to do that to somebody else? Or does that change your mindset for the day? Maybe you're having a bad morning. Just that simple moment of human connection, is it going to set you on a
Oh my
slightly different
gosh, absolutely. It's funny you say the smile thing. So, this was several years ago, about 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. My husband and I were looking to move, and we had small kids at the time. My kids are a little bit older now, but we would drive around this neighborhood that we now live in, and we called it the wave test. So, the neighborhood that we lived in felt very like me first and not community centered. And our kids were little and we were looking for something different. So we would drive around the neighborhood that we wanted to live in at different points in the day. And anybody walking on the street, we'd wave to see if they'd wave back. And that was like a big thing for us. And we started to recognize that almost every person would wave back. And like would be very friendly even though they didn't know us, right? And we're like, okay, that's it. There's something about that community, but it's relatable to the smile, right? If they're willing to like make eye contact and smile back, there's something different about that person or that community of people that is inviting and involving. So I that's so cool. There's so much power in these micro moments, and we've overcomplicated what we do and how we do it. I was sharing with you at the beginning when we started talking, like one of my core values is to keep it super simple. And these things that people can do, there's really no excuse. It's not, you don't need approval for it. You don't need a budget for it. You don't need anybody telling you, go do this or go do that. You just do it. And it's really, really, really powerful. I am with you and I am going to be part of that community.
Yeah, put your idea up and then notice how you feel when you're doing it for somebody else as
Yeah,
well,
for
and the
sure.
reaction you get. I just this may be a we may get a little wave, we could get a tidal wave out of it, but it's not business driven. It is simply a way to take what we do and give back to the community and be the collector of these ideas to help them spread around the world.
Yeah, I love that. It's so cool. And if nothing else, people can lean on it to see what another idea they can do that they haven't tried yet, and they should just go do it. There's power in that for sure. Really cool. Okay, so I mean, you have a whole collective now of simple ideas, but if I could ask you, to anybody listening, what's the one thing that people can go do after listening to this to improve their personal vibe, the vibe of their team, the vibe of their workplace? What is that one thing that you say, just like go start doing now that will kind of move them in the right direction?
Boy, this is where my brain is probably going to show up in the app as being frustrated because there's a few things that I
Okay, you
would.
can do 2 things if you'd like, you know?
One of the things that helps tremendously to understand the current vibe and where you want it to be, because we have a saying that's not our own, but culture is going to form whether you're intentional about it or not. And so let's develop the culture you really want. And the way to do that for us is to start with discovery. And that can take many, many forms. The way we do it is through a culture diagnostic. It's a very, very surprisingly simple tool, but it gets to a point, it doesn't take a lot of time, gets to a point where the leader understands what's really going on. And every time we've done it, the leader will always say, yep, I knew those things. Oh, that I didn't know was happening. And we create an environment where people will share one on one with us in a confidential, anonymous setting. And we start to see patterns. We call them themes. So that would be one thing is pause, take the time to really understand what's going on and why the vibe might be off inside your culture. Some leaders are very astute at this and they'll call us and say things aren't right. We hear you're pretty good at this. Can you come in and help us figure it out? The other thing I would go back to is work on building trust. It doesn't necessarily come naturally for leaders. Some leaders are very protective in the way they lead. They don't want to let people in. They want to be seen as the person with the answers, the authority, that they can confidently guide the team. We all bring our stuff into the way we lead. It comes from our childhood all the way up through the lessons we've learned in our careers. Taking the time to build a more candid, open, collaborative environment, deepening that sense of trust so that you can truly get the very best out of people and they will meet you there because you're demonstrating that.
Just be human.
Be human.
I mean, that is the truth of the matter though, right? Like we all come with our stuff and let's just like show up, to your point, how we'd like to show up and what we're willing to share, not being forced to share it all, right? Cuz some people just aren't ready for that, but yeah, just be you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tim. I am so appreciative of this. I have so many questions like the neuroscience piece, the term involvement, how you define. I mean, there's more to this, but I know that we'll get there and we'll keep building on it. So thank you. We'll put all your stuff in the show notes so people can find you and join you in what you're doing to make an impact on for the greater good. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me in to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Tim, for hanging out with me and sharing so much wisdom about trust, culture, and honestly, just how important the vibe really is at work. In Tim's journey from corporate life to building something of his own, he really showed us that culture doesn't just happen. You've got to be intentional about it, whether it's documenting what's really going on, building trust through being real, or just keeping things simple and human. Little steps make a huge difference. So today I'm throwing out a challenge for all of you. What's the vibe where you work? And what's one small thing you can do today to make it better? Maybe it's a kind word, some real feedback, or just creating space for people to be themselves. Try it and see what happens. And until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.